Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Mark McAllister, Senior Partner for Holborn Assets based down here in sunny Cape Town. And I'm joining you today for a webinar focused on the taxation predominantly of foreign pensions from those that you have earned whilst being employed abroad. And in particularly today, focusing on the potential upcoming tax changes mooted by the South African government and what you can do to protect yourself with those changes in mind. Here are all our contact details. Don't hesitate to scan the QR code in front or reach out to us on social media, and we'll do our very best to assist you in any way that we can going forward. If you've got questions and you're joining us on Zoom, please don't hesitate to click on the Q&A button at the center of the screen. You can ask any questions as you think of them, and then what we'll do is our best to answer them all together at the end. So a little bit about Holborn. Who are we? Well, we've been around for over 25 years now. We were formed in 1998, predominantly in the Middle East, and we've grown into a global business now, managing $3 billion of funds across multiple countries, clients in over 30 different countries, offices in over 11, including five offices now in South Africa, 3 in the Western Cape, where I am, and one in Mauritius, and then loads in other jurisdictions around the world. We've also got several thousand Trustpilot reviews, so feel free to check out the comments there. We are experts in cross-border financial planning and tax structuring in particular in this market. So let's get started. What is a UK pension? I'll focus on that because the majority of our clients do relocate back from the UK. Some of these principles do also apply to other countries as well, but with slight variances. So a pension is typically a tax efficient vehicle to help you grow and protect your savings and to provide for you when you retire. You are encouraged to do so you aren't a burden on the state, and that's normally done through tax incentives. So normally you get either tax relief or a bit added on top by the government or employers. So normally tax relief going in, but the deal is you then pay tax on the way out, very similar to the South African system. So some UK pensions provide a pot of cash that you can use at a certain age. Others can automatically go into a regular income stream throughout your retirement, and you may or may not be aware of which type you have. We'll try and provide you a bit of very general guidance and information today. So whilst you've been abroad in the UK, particularly if you're a South African that went there in the early 2000s, statistically you've probably passed through Southwest 19 at some point or somewhere nearby, Putney's Rain Park, Wimbledon, etc. And after your property, your pension is likely to be one of your second biggest assets. If you've worked abroad for a period of time and not stayed in touch with your UK pension, there's about £19 billion in unclaimed pension pots left languishing back in the UK. One of those could potentially be yours. One of the things that's changed fairly recently now, quite a few years ago, really, when you look back, is March 2017. They changed the law. So if you wanted to move your UK pension away to somewhere, quite often this would be somewhere like Gibraltar or Malta, you now have to pay a 25% exit tax to make it move outside of the UK. So after that, a lot of people stopped moving their pensions abroad, instead just managed them remotely in the UK, but from where they are in South Africa. The key thing is finding the right kind of providers that will work with you to do that. One of the ways or the reasons why that change occurred is it's perceived as a way of reducing the large number of overseas transfers that therefore move the money outside the UK government's control. And with the latest Labour government, it's becoming quite apparent why they want to do that, because it opens up the opportunity for taxation when times are hard, and Rachel Reeves is likely to take more action against the UK pension system if rumours are to be believed. Let's move on now to the main types of UK pension. So firstly, state pension. Okay, this is provided by Her Majesty government. It's a amount that was relative to the amount of national insurance contributions you paid and how long you've been working in the UK. We'll come on to that in a minute. There's defined contributions and defined benefits. So most pensions fall into those 3 categories, sometimes a little bit of a hybrid of 2, but we'll go into those in a bit more depth now. So let's start with the state pension. So everyone is entitled to a state pension if they worked in the UK for long enough. There is the older basic state pension, there's the newer state pension, and that can equate to a maximum amount of sort of currently £220 odd a week if you've got all the years that you need. And the full new state pension needs 35 years of employment or national insurance contributions for you to qualify. If you don't have a full 35 years, then you still get a pension, but you'll be a prorated smaller amount. And if you are able or have left the UK already, you can pay voluntary contributions to make up the difference for the last 6 years or so. One of the things we always encourage clients to do, go and check your current national insurance record online. It's very easy to do so. You just need a government gateway ID by going to gov.uk/check-state-pension. So let's just walk you through how you would do that. So go into this web address, very straightforward. It's a very easy way to do this. And once you're there, this is the web page that will be presented. Sign in with your government gateway ID. If you haven't got one, obviously you need to go and register for one. That's something I'm not going to cover in this video. But once you've signed in, then you'll be able to say what you're entitled to and what year and what it equates to, and very, very simple to understand. However, what it will also show you is what happens if you don't contribute any further. So for example, in my case, because I moved out of the UK, there is a shortfall that's building up. So I need to add another 17 years, from when I did this screenshot a few years ago, of pension contributions to get up to a full amount. And at that time, £203.85 was the most per week I could get. So that shows you if you've got a shortfall there. If you want to see a full in-depth breakdown, just click on this link at the bottom and it shows you how to view your full national insurance record. And then you can see which years are not full and which ones are, and it's very, very straightforward and easy to understand. So in my case, done 18 years of full contributions. I've got 26 years left to contribute. I've got 8 years that I didn't contribute enough, and those are the 8 years that I have topped up since. There we go. So that is the best way to do it. The UK government works very much online these days. There is a manual solution. I would not recommend this, having spoken to a number of clients that have attempted it. But if you do want to go down this route, you can do the same process, but by downloading a BR19 form from the government website and posting it in. And you can learn more about topping up NICs, as they're nicknamed, the National Insurance Contribution System, and how to do it from abroad, again, at that web address there. If you've got any specific questions on this afterwards, don't hesitate to reach out to my team, and I will do our best to try and guide you through it. So once you've got your forecast, you can then apply to pay for the shortfall. You don't have to fund the Class 3 version, and the Class 2 contributions are about a quarter of the cost. They are allowed, but these days you do need to prove via discussions with HMRC that you can pay the lower amount. They were almost allowing that to happen by default a while ago, and then they've changed their process, so now the onus is on you to prove. So you can see there's a significant cost difference between the two. And for every year that you buy back, it does equate to about another £9 a week in pension for life, so it does make sense to think about it. And since April 2025, unfortunately, the law has now changed. That gate has closed. So you were able to contribute for years previously beyond the 6 years. Now it's really tightened up quite significantly. One of the things you can do is use this form here, a CF83 form, and that allows you to register with them to pay those national insurance contributions from abroad. So if in doubt, that's the form that you are looking for. It's very easy to access, CF83. Just Google it and download the form from there if you want to explore that. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of background on state pension. Let's move on to private pensions. So this is where you've worked somewhere and accumulated an investment amount in a pension. I often use these examples as an analogy. So let's just imagine we're going on a journey to retirement. We're starting off in the UK, and let's say we're coming down to South Africa for various different reasons. So we can do that journey in a number of different vehicles, right? And different vehicles have different characteristics. Very similar with pensions. So on that journey, we could go in a tank. Okay, what's a tank? Well, it's very solid, it's very reliable, it's bulletproof, but also very, very slow and lumbering. So you're definitely going to get there, but it might take you longer than you would like. You could go in a car. Again, everyone understands the difference between the two. Car is probably more cost-effective, cheaper, more reliable, I would argue, maybe, but it will definitely get you there quicker. but maybe not as safe if someone was to, quote Mark, start shooting you. That's where maybe the analogy starts to wear a bit thin. You could go there in a plane, a jet fighter. Jet fighter will get you there much quicker, but it's probably going to be very expensive to put fuel into it. And what happens if it falls out of the sky? And that's a very tenuous link onto the various different types of options that you've got when it comes to retirement pension vehicles. So what do we mean by that? Let's apply some of those examples. So a defined benefit scheme is often the tank in my analogy. So I'm sometimes referred to as a final salary or a gold-plated scheme. They were designed very much for a bygone era, very, very rare these days. These are generally the slow, risk, and safe pensions subject to the host company. So again, there's some issues there where companies have failed historically. It's more of a promise to pay rather than a fund amount, as it were. And that amount will rise with inflation normally, depending on what your final salary was when you retired or stopped working for that business. And that's hence the name final salary schemes. A lot of schemes were in deficit or might still be in deficit now. This was really caused through the period pre-COVID where interest rates were so low. There's a lot of technical points that I'm not going to go into in this presentation. But as a result, a lot were having to take action to top up assets and avoid failure. Some did fail. Some went into the pension protection fund. So let me just give you an example of what a DB scheme, as we call it in the industry, looks like. So let's take Fred as an example. He's 60 years old. There's a pension trustee there that has an obligation to pay him, say, £10,000 a year as a defined benefit. So it's a defined amount that he's entitled to each year. What do they have? Well, they have investments they have to hold that also have to be pretty reliable, pretty predictable. So these are quite often, going to be things like treasury gilts, etc. And this 1% return is maybe a little bit outdated now, but when interest rates were on the floor pre-COVID, that was quite often an issue. So if you have £1 million in assets, you could generate about £10,000 a year very, very safely. And that was obviously how things were for quite some time. Then interest rates fell even further. And as an example, let's say you've got the same investment engine and they dropped by 0.5%. Well, now you need £2 million of assets to generate the same £10,000 a year to Fred. And again, the issue just keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's a very crude example I've put together there, but hopefully that just explains a little bit more as to why some defined benefit schemes were getting into issues and in deficit. It wasn't necessarily that they were bad. It was the fact that the returns they were getting were very, very low because of what they had to purchase because of the rules of the scheme. So to get £10,000 a year for Fred, they now need to have £4 million, which they may or may not have had, depending on how they're funded. Let's say Fred then passes away, which is something to think about. His wife, Wilma, same age, she would then inherit what was left of the pension normally. However, does she get the full £10,000 a year? No, she doesn't. Normally, 50 to 60% is left to the spouse. So when Fred passed away, Wilma would only get £5,000 a year ongoing. Let's say Wilma passes away. What happens? Two children. I'll give you a guess at what their names are. But let's just say that they are under the age of 18. Sorry, over the age of 18. Normally there'll be nothing for them. If they're under the age of 18, there's normally a bit that's left for them. But effectively what happens is the pension normally will die with the second spouse. Again, depends on the rules of the scheme. It's always best to analyze these to be certain, but normally it dies at that point, has no value for the kids or grandkids. Okay, so let's just take an example of when things go wrong. Let's look at the coronavirus example and the panic that happened there. Let's go, imagine that Fred is 40 years of age now with one of these schemes. And what was quite often happening before 2020 is people would look to cash out, take an offer to leave, so the pension trustees effectively are paying people off to get out of the scheme. And those cash equivalent transfer values were ranging somewhere in the region of between 20 and 40 times the amount. So 200 to 400,000 pounds. You can't take it as cash, you have to go into another pension scheme. That number is really linked quite heavily to what's called the UK gilt rate. So I won't bore you with all the details, but right now, generally speaking, it's very rare we would advise a client to look at a defined benefit transfer option until those gilt rates really start to come down the other way. But again, on a case-by-case basis, it's something that might be worth looking at just to make sure that you understand. Why would you do that? Well, let's just say that we take that £400,000 offer. at age 40, Fred invests it, puts it into a pension pot, and grows it, at 5% a year in his own control. It might be worth, say, £1 million, when he gets to 60. So therefore, he could take £52,500 a year as opposed to £10,000 a year. So there you go. You can just see the maths on it. Yes, it's slightly riskier. We're introducing market risk here. So what if markets don't go up at 5% a year? That's where we come in. And obviously, if it has grown by that amount, then the return is significantly higher whilst Fred is alive. And then if Fred passes away, 100% of that pot, the whole million in this example, would go to Wilma. So she could then draw it down and take £52,000 a year as opposed to £5,000 a year. So almost like a 10 times improvement overall. And then when Wilma dies or passes, and hasn't necessarily passed the pension pot on yet, but when she does, that full amount would go to the children when she then passes. So overall, it's something that's just worth looking at to make sure you fully understand what it is that you have in place. Generally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of governments around the world. And here's an example why, in 2016, 2017, former pensions ministers were very actively transferring their pension plans away. Why? Well, guess what? The gilt rate that I mentioned earlier was at one of its best levels for pension transfers. So what I'm saying is just be aware of these options. It might not be the right time now, but in the future, if we see interest rates continue to come down, it might be something that's worth visiting then. If you did transfer out of a defined benefit, where would you put it? Well, it has to go to another pension. So you would probably put it into what's called a defined contribution scheme, also known as a money purchase scheme. If you haven't got a defined benefit scheme, you've probably actually got a defined contribution scheme. So, what are these? They're pots of money, they're tax relief. They normally buy investment fund units or stocks and shares, etc. All the growth inside is that pension is tax-free, and it should continue to go up even if you're not adding any more to that. Very common pension trustees that we come across all the time, likes of Aegon, Aviva, Standard Life, Willis Towers Watson, etc. So if you recognize any of those names, it's quite likely you've got what we call a DC scheme in place. Typical costs range between 1% and 3% per annum, depending on who you're with, how it's managed, what it's invested in. Projections for growth normally somewhere between -1% and 5.4% per year on annum, again, depending on what it is that you're invested in. They're very, very generic, very homogenized to save cost. So in the example I used earlier, very much like a typical car, it's like a Toyota Corolla or a white Ford Mondeo. It goes at probably 55 mile an hour in the middle lane of the motorway. But you might not want a four-door car like that. You might want a two-door sports car or a 4x4 or a bakkie or something like that. And in that case, that's where maybe it's time to have a look to see what other options are out there. They normally have restricted funds lists. That's again where they often make their margins, where they run the funds as well as provide the structures. Key thing about DCs, currently you can leave 100% of that amount to your beneficiaries, spouse and children, and that will be tax-free currently up to your 75th birthday. I need to add that. However, and I'll come on to this in a minute, that is under review by the UK government, and let's hope Rachel Reeves, etc., don't ruin that for everyone, but we'll see. Okay, so when it comes to taking pension out of these various pots, we call that taking benefit. So let's just look at what those look like. So first of all, a defined benefit, so you know what you're getting at. It's a defined outcome. You can normally access these from age 55, that's the state age, but you'll often find the scheme is restricted, and normally you'll only be able to get it from age 65 onwards. So you might have to wait another 10 years to get that promise to pay. With a defined contribution, access is from age 55. Bad news is that unfortunately that is rising to 57 from April 2028. So if you're in your 40s like I am, you've got to wait another couple of years. It's just part of the issue around an aging population and trying to spread out the challenges around the pension system in the UK. Currently, you are allowed to take a 25% pension commencement lump sum. So take whatever it's worth on your 57th or 55th birthday, divide it by 4, and that amount you can be paid out tax-free. And then you've got 3 options. Normally, you can go and buy an annuity. It's an insurance-based product that provides a fixed amount of income. You can go into drawdown, where you choose to sell a regular amount every single month or every quarter or once a year. It's completely flexible. And then the last one is the full flexi access, what's often referred to as the Ferrari option, where you take your entire pension pot in one go, pay all the tax, and it goes into your bank account in one go. And the concern was that pensioners would be rolling around in Ferraris. Thankfully, that hasn't come to pass. So everyone's been quite sensible with it, but it does provide some options, and currently provides some excellent options for South African tax residents for now. And I don't want to harp on this point, but there is potentially a massive government change on the way around taxation of foreign pensions in South Africa. So if you are anywhere near 55 and above right now, and you still haven't accessed your pension funds, please talk to us urgently and watch the rest of this video if you want to understand why that is so important. Which brings me on nicely to where we're at now. The warning in this webinar is that pensions are again under fire, and it's a two-way barrage. There are bullets flying from both South Africa and the UK at the same time. Makes it very challenging to advise on because a lot of it hasn't been confirmed yet. But let me take you through it. So the headlines are that we might see the end of the famous income tax exemption in South Africa. One of the worst government decisions I think I've seen for a long time. The financial impact on South Africa is going to be significant, but I'll talk about more about that in a second. And again, I mentioned Rachel Reeves earlier, the discussion of adding UK inheritance tax to pension pots from 2027. Utter madness, in my opinion. People have saved diligently for years, done the right thing in the UK, and then here they come wanting to take inheritance tax from something that has always been, in my view, the sort of government contract with its people is that these would be tax-free. So just again shows that sadly you can't ever rely on governments to do the right thing. They will often tax you whenever they get the chance and just continue to turn the screws over time. So let's go into that a bit more in depth. Let's start off with South Africa. What are they up to? What are they doing? And how are they going to damage you in the process? Well, firstly, there is one article that is doing the rounds that really sort of puts a date on this. So this is the link if you want to go and check it out. Some of you, I think, will have seen this. It's on Business Tech, authored by a company called Tax Consulting SA. They seem to be pretty adamant that the change is going to happen from the 1st of March 2026. What does it effectively mean? It means currently where you would get an exemption and that income tax would not be chargeable in South Africa, so you could effectively draw pension income tax free. It would then be fully income taxable up to 45% tax in South Africa from March 2026 onwards. So our message is act urgently to address this and understand exactly what you might need to do before it's too late. Do not procrastinate on this. Do not leave it to the last minute. It takes time to make these kind of decisions in an informed manner, so please don't delay. However, this is the only source that is detailing that it's the 1st of March 2026. We're very close to a number of tax consultants with extensive experience, and it's in consultation at the moment, but no decision has been firmly made as far as we're aware from other circles. So we worry that maybe this article is a little bit fear-mongery in nature. So the message is take it with a pinch of salt. However, be aware that this could potentially happen and plan accordingly before it's too late. So what is it and what is it proposing? Well, it talks about the very famous Section 10(1) GC-2 exemption. It exempts from taxation past employment outside of South Africa for foreign employment, and obviously excludes anything to do with South African retirement funds. This is about stuff that you've accumulated when abroad. Been around since 2001. So it did come out a little bit out of left field that they suddenly decided to change it in 2025. Why was it put in place? Well, it was done to attract retirees. It was done to reduce the SARS administration burden. As a result, lots and lots of South Africans that went to the UK, as an example, want to retire back to South Africa and spend that money in South Africa tax-free. I know of at least 5 couples now that are thinking about not relocating to South Africa that I've been speaking to, and also several of our clients that are now relocating back to the UK because their view on it is quite simple. if they're going to have to pay tax, they want an NHS that works. They want a police force that's effective. They want various other benefits provided. So if anybody from government is watching this on the South African side, please be aware that this is more likely to have a massive economic impact on South Africa. It really is short-sighted in its nature. So the exemption was detailed quite fully in 2017, so explaining how it all works. And I've got a copy of this if you want, just reach out to me and I'll send it across to you. The changes that are proposed was buried on page 42 of the National Budget Review this year, chapter 4. What does it actually say? That the proposed changes are that any currently exempted lump sums, pensions, and annuities received by South African residents from foreign retirement funds for previous employment outside South Africa, with amendments in the current legislative cycle. What does that actually mean? We don't know. So they could change it tomorrow. They could change it on the 1st of March 2026. They could change it at any point between now and the next election. And we hope that common sense potentially will prevail here. And then maybe they'll spend longer reviewing whether this is actually a good idea and not as short-sighted as we think it is. So the key thing is that they're trying to address this double non-taxation of cross-border retirement funds. So their view on it is that you've paid no tax on the way in, you should pay no tax on the way out. I would argue, well, you get more for your money in the UK. You do get proper pension benefits. You do get an NHS that works. You do get police forces that are properly funded. You don't have to pay for private security, etc. There's so many examples. So it's not the same. And at the end of the day, we don't know when this change will be made or what it will look like. But it's accepted that this is probably what it's going to look like. But there is a high risk of implementation, not implantation, apologies, from March 2026. Let's wait and see what happens. So what are the impacts? Well, again, we'll talk through an example in a second, how much more tax you will pay if this comes into place with a real world example that's been screened by our tax consultants we work with. We've already discussed behavioral impact. People will leave this country. They will take their jobs that they employ, the domestic staff, the gardeners, the people that they support in the local community, the charity work that they do. All of that will emigrate with them. It's no different to the changes that the UK found when they started to target non-DOMs, and as a result, loads moved abroad to Dubai. It's very, very short-sighted. And as a result, property market will probably take a dip, and that will have further economic impact. So, like I say, very, very short-sighted. Let's just talk through an example in the real world. So let's say you had a £900,000 pension pot, you're taking 4% on that drawdown approach that I talked about earlier. A lot of money, but very sustainable, growing it at 5, 6, 7%. You still maintain your capital and then some, generating £36,000 a year, about 850,000 rands, depending on what the exchange rate is. So 71,000 rand a month. Currently, under the law, all of that goes into your bank account and all of that is yours. So that's what we mean by exempted, okay? As long as you have a NT code in place with the payroll on the UK side. And that's something, again, we help clients to get that secured for their pensions so that you're able to enjoy it not being deducted at source as well. So after the change, take that same example, what will happen? Well, you'll take that 850,000 rand, give or take, you have to pay income tax on it. So effectively, net of tax now, it reduces down to 595,000 rand-ish. So this change will make a client in this situation about 255,000 rand poorer a year, 21,000 rands a month. Okay, there's a lot of money there. And that's what the South African government are looking at. They are probably crunching the numbers and going, oh yeah, this is something that these people, can afford. Not going to lose any votes by targeting, quote marks, rich foreigners. What I think they're missing is the fact that these kind of people will almost certainly move and emigrate to different countries, taking, like I say, their foreign investment with them. So, yeah, sad news, but that's what the government policy is considering. There are slightly different rules around cure ops for those that have transferred. You remember I said about those solutions pre-2017. So you're outside of the UK framework already, and probably quite thankful to be. And if you've got a cure ups in somewhere like Gibraltar or Malta, but in particular Gibraltar being the better one, any payments are taxed 2.5% at source on the way out. However, and again, we don't have clarity from government on this, doesn't mean that it's not going to be free of additional taxation. So, you might potentially have to pay tax on top of that payment up to 42.5% to get you up to 45%, depending on what your other income streams are. Still awaiting clarity from government, but obviously these are big numbers, so it's very much worthwhile checking to see whether these impact you at all. So regardless, our advice is if you are able to or thinking about it, consider taking your pension commencement lump sum if you're over the age of 55, just to be clear, before March 2026. And that will then mean that you can get that as a South African tax resident free of tax. But please talk to us or another professional tax consultant or accountant first before you push the button. You might have other unexpected consequences by doing so. But generally speaking, our advice is to lean in that direction. If you do already pay tax on your UK pension income, so it's deducted at source, then you're not going to pay South Africa as well. Just to be clear, there is a dual tax agreement in place that stops that. So, for example, if you're ex-civil service, military, police, that sort of thing, NHS, you do still have to declare your income tax to SARS, and that can result in a credit or a rebate from SARS under the dual tax agreement. So again, our advice is take advice from a tax consultant and potentially make sure that all your affairs are in order. If in doubt, make sure. One of the things that we offer with all of this, I know it's a lot to take in, is a free pension MOT. We look under the bonnet and assess what you have in place. So ask yourself these questions. Do you honestly know who your pension is with today? Quite often people say, oh yeah, it's with Aviva or it's with Aegon or it's with Standard Life. Yeah, sure. But then they find out it was sold to Willis Towers Watson or it's sold to a Standard Life or something like that. Pension books change hands in the UK all the time. And each time there's a change, there's yet another opportunity for you to lose contact with your pension fund. And that's the conundrum. Those 19 billion pounds didn't just find their way there by accident. So, you might have lost touch with something you're entitled to. So if you don't know exactly who it's with, then it's worth having a look. And do you know how much it's worth today? Do you have immediate online access? Are you able to see, what it's doing and why? Do you know what it's invested in? And I'm not just talking about, it's with, Aegon or something like that. Do you actually know what they buy underneath? What stocks, what shares, what's the performance? If this was a cycle race, how is it competing against others in the peloton? Is it right at the front or is it consistently at the back, and lagging behind its peer group? How have Trump's tariffs impacted value? We've had, coronavirus, we've had all sorts of challenges, we've had wars. But what's going on with tariffs? Has that really damaged your pension fund? Is it completely exposed, for example, to the UK, which has been very lackluster in growth when you compare it to American markets over the last decade or so? So understanding all of that. The key thing, though, again, I come back to is this question: how is it performing against its peers? Is it going as fast or faster than other pensions of similar ilk? Or if not, what can we do to improve it to make sure it's suitable for you? For your risk profile and all those sort of questions, but that it's performing at the level that you want. And then that then feeds into predicting what will it be worth when you come to retire. And if you're not sure on any of those points, time to think about our free pension reconnection service. Let us do the legwork for you. We deal with these providers all day, every day. We can go and find out through a very simple letter of authority. It doesn't allow us to change anything, just to be clear. It allows us to have a look under the proverbial bonnet for you. What we then do is go away and then come back with a very simple to read red, amber, green report. And what it will say is, look, leave it where it is. Potentially make some adjustments or potentially move it somewhere else. 4 times out of 10, we normally recommend to leave it where it is, but it just gives you a second opinion on what you have in place, and then you can make decisions from there. Okay, moving on. Again, we've talked about the South African angle. Let's talk about now what's happening in the UK and this UK inheritance tax change. So currently the IHT nil rate band is £325,000 and the residence nil rate band of 175 been frozen until 2030. But the key thing, and I've highlighted it there in yellow, it's from 2027, inherited pensions, so those that you pass on to your kids, etc., might be subject to inheritance tax from 2027. Here's my view on inheritance tax. It is, broadly speaking, a voluntary levy paid by those who distrust their heirs more than they dislike the Inland Revenue or SARS. So if you pay inheritance tax or estate duty, you have not planned effectively. Okay, this is part of our role, is to mitigate quite legally unnecessary taxation. Pay unto Caesar what is due to Caesar, absolutely, but do not pay a tax that is voluntary, like inheritance tax, in my view. So let me give you some real world examples. Let's take an example here of John and Mary. Let's say they're both 53, living in Cape Town, and this is what they have in place. So they've got a bank account left in the UK, there's some cash in it. They've got a UK investment property, it's rented out, no mortgage, they paid it off before they came here. And they've got private pensions. This is where I use my red box, green box analogy. So red boxes, that's things that the government are interested in. It's things they can tax, it's things that you own in your hands. It's your asset, so to speak. Green box items are things that are either tax-free or tax efficient. So currently a UK pension fits nicely into that green box and sort of moves that value away from the taxman in some way, shape or form. So in that example there, current exposure to UK inheritance tax is about £80,000. And that's even if they pass away in South Africa, it's a UK, what we call cited tax. So it's applicable on those assets regardless. Let's go forward to 2027. This law changes. Property value's probably gone up a little bit. Fingers crossed. Let's hope Rachel Reeves doesn't ruin the economy much more. But the key thing is that the private pensions are now in that red box as well. So the inheritance tax has just jumped from £80,000 to £480,000. So that's an extra £400,000 that will be going to the UK government if they were to pass away in the worst case, joint death, car accident, something like that, that currently they wouldn't have to pay. So my advice is, talk to us and we'll talk about, those options to try and mitigate that. But like I say, in summary, what do? We recommend starting with understanding what you have. So that free pension MOT, easy to do. We'll happily give you a view on what you have. Many UK providers don't also want clients who move overseas. They insist on sending you things by post. And if anybody's trying to receive a letter in South Africa, good luck. So perhaps one of the things you might want to do is consider, moving your defined contribution into an alternative. It'd be locally managed here from South Africa, but the assets are still a UK-based pension under UK rules. And you might also want to do that before this DJ change. If you're 55 and above, you might want to consider some kind of withdrawal. You've got multiple pension pots. Maybe it's time to look about how we can consolidate those. And if you're over the age of 55, perhaps it might make sense in lieu of these changes that are on the horizon that you consider taking it out of that structure and put it somewhere else. Also, don't forget that point that, if you're close to 55, then from 2028, the normal minimum pension access age in the UK is rising from 55 to 57. Another couple of years to wait for those affected by that change. Okay, let's just touch again on a few tax points that are relevant. So this is my red box, green box analogy. So what is a red box in my view? It's something that you personally own. It might be bank accounts, it might be stocks, it might be shares, it might be your property, it might be investment properties, it might be crypto, it might be collectibles, it might be whatever. It's something that you personally own. How is it commonly taxed in South Africa? Well, if you generate income, so interest in a bank as an example, up to 45% income tax. If it's dividends, 20% dividends tax is the norm. And if it's a gain and you sell something for more than you pay for it, you will often pay 18% capital gains tax, up to 18% capital gains tax. It's 40% of your income tax rate in South Africa. And if you pass away, you normally pay estate duty of at least 20%, and that's on anything over 7 million rand as a couple. And they also say budget 5% for executors' fees. Why? Typical executor fee in South Africa, so to manage probate and all the rest of it, 3.5% plus VAT. So very quickly you get very close to 5% by the time they've had some legal fees along the way. And don't forget, it often takes a couple of years or so to handle a cross-border probate because of the way that the court systems work. Nobody will pay money out to someone that's owed from an estate until they've proven that that person is definitely entitled to that money. So if your your beneficiaries can wait a couple of years for the money, then by all means put it in a red box and trust the system. However, a lot of our clients look to the green box. And what is a green box? Well, it's normally some kind of investment or a structural option that has some element of tax efficiency, or it might be completely tax-free depending on the jurisdiction you're in. What are examples? Well, things like local trusts, pensions, annuities, endowments, foreign retirement plans, offshore trusts, you name it. There's a whole wide range of solutions out there for different people. Different folks need different strokes, and there are different tax rules for each of these different solutions. So there is no one size fits all solution, but quite often people look to do these sort of things. So with the UK pension that's currently in the green box, looking like it's very much going to move towards the red box, well, maybe it's time to then move that as well back to something else once you've cashed it out. And that's the thing that a lot of people that are thinking about now is acting before these changes come and bite, maybe from March next year. Question is, what do you do? There's lots of different options. You could go for a direct investment, again, red box, investment property, red box. You could go start to look at things in the green box category, like endowments, like foreign trusts, like foreign retirement plans and living annuities. And like I say, all of those solutions have different benefits, different cost structures, different entry points, different reasons why it would make sense. And this is where we would encourage you to have a proper financial planning discussion if you feel that this is the kind of thing that you're looking at. Without giving you the full ins and outs for every different solution, here we go. There's different reasons that people would do things, and as you can see there, if you take direct investments, great solution, but it might be in primary currency. But does it really mitigate South African political risk? Depends how it's done. If you do it in rands, you might be stuck. From a rand perspective, definitely not tax efficient. Might be easily accessible. Doesn't mitigate probate. Not good for succession. Does have inheritance tax applying. And again, you go through all those other options there. They all have various different benefits. And still, the retirement plan, foreign retirement plan, even with the changes we're talking about, does stand out head and shoulders above the rest, particularly as there are certain nuances that allow those to be used that will not be affected by these changes in March next year, as far as we're aware. So it's worth looking at all of these options with a financial planner. And if your financial planner can only do, for example, endowments and doesn't know a trust from a foreign pension or what have you, then that's where we would encourage you to come and speak to ourselves, and we'll give you our view on all of the options, not just a limited view. We are an independent broker. We are able to provide you solutions no matter where they are around the world. We don't have a quote marks Holborn solution. We use product providers that offer these, so you'll get the best of the whole market rather than just a solution that happens to have my badge on it, which we don't do. So in summary, what do we say? The changes that we've discussed are not law yet. They're very likely, but please keep up to date on the socials with us to see the latest updates from both HMRC and SARS. If any of this has resonated with you, please reach out to us and our preferred tax consultants, Gelworth Rushby. We're here to help. We will help you create a holistic cross-border wealth plan, and from that, suggest what your options are. Consider your PCLS, pension commencement lump sum options, and also getting that NT code in place. Again, if that all sounds very, very difficult and a little bit like hieroglyphics, then speak to us and we'll help guide you through the process. And just evaluate the time of your pension withdrawals. Don't leave it too late. Give yourself a few months. If this is March next year, my message to all our clients is we need to start now to be ready, and let's then do the move when we know it's definitely happening. Be prepared is the message from us. Don't necessarily do it, but be prepared and give yourself time to get prepared. And then whilst we're in that preparation phase, let's explore alternatives. Let's consider jurisdictions, products and structures that have those green box qualities. They're tax efficient and have proper holistic wealth planning solutions in mind. Oh, sorry, that slide's gone in there twice. Apologies. There we go. All right, that's it from me, ladies and gentlemen. I can see we've got some questions coming in now, so feel free to drop us a message, ask a Q&A question by clicking on that button in the center, or drop us a WhatsApp. Feel free to send us an email after this or a WhatsApp, and we'll reach out to you and have a discussion. That's it from that. So let's go on to the questions now. So I'm just going to open up the first one. Okay, so thank you very much for your question, first of all, Paul. With UK pensions, does the 25% tax-free have to be taken out when you hit 55, and does it have to be all taken in one go? Fantastic question. So long story short, no, it doesn't. You can leave it for as long as you want, but you do have to take it in the first year of when you start to take it out. So if you left it until you were 65, you would have to take an amount out, which can be up to 25%. But if you try and spread that over to the second year, it won't count. So generally speaking, the methodology is take a quarter of your fund out in one go when you're ready. However, my only caveat to that is that if the UK government are going to look to remove this 25% tax-free lump sum, and you are able to access it because you're over the age of 55, again, it's another reason to maybe think about doing it now. It's better to be, away from the situation than caught up with it if that starts to happen. So hopefully, Paul, that answers your question there. Okay, moving on to the next question. I think I've got one here from on WhatsApp, and this is a question. Oh, hang on, sorry, let's read this one. I need to get my glasses changed. Yeah, so this is a question from Steve, just asking about the content of the article and how certain are we that this change is going to happen on the 1st of March 2026. Look, all I can say is that the authors of the article in question have been very vocal in this kind of space before. They were very, very vocal about the use of financial immigration as a solution. And my experience has been that a lot of people used a financial immigration service when they didn't need to, and that's a cost associated with that. So I'm always very cautious about any fear-based marketing, fear-based articles in the press, etc. And this is the only one that I'm aware of. That being said, there might be something that they are aware of that the rest of the community, both advisory and tax consultants, aren't aware of. I will be keeping a very close ear to the ground. So Janine Gelbreath, who I work with very closely, is actually in the working party on this issue. So she will be making these representations direct to government over the consultation period. We hope that common sense will prevail. It's just I still can't believe that they're looking at doing this. Well, I can understand it. When the coffers are bare, they look to scratch every bit down the back of the sofa is the way they find the loose change. But it doesn't mean that it's going to have the best outcome for the country, which is such a shame. So hopefully that answers your question. So in short, no, we don't know for definite, but we are quietly confident when government starts to make noises about grabbing money that they're owed or they feel that they're owed, they often follow through on it. Okay. Another question on WhatsApp here. This is from Tanya. Hi, Tanya. So just asking about the pension MOT. Is there any obligation or cost associated with that? Okay, just to be clear, yeah, we will look at that for you free of charge. We'll come back to you, and my team, I feel, are excellent at taking very complicated content and explaining it in plain English. We'll do all of that for you free of any charge. What we would then do, if you're interested, is we'd be probably making recommendations for a provider that will work with people that live abroad in a very cost-effective manner and with a view to improve performance. We've got a lot of very successful client reviews and testimonials in that regard. So if you want to hear from us on that, if you want to speak to those other clients, you're more than welcome to do so. And hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. But no charge for that. We just do it as an information service. All we would ask in return is if you know of other people that would benefit from it, just that puts in touch with them as well, so we can spread the message. Because, like I say, my concern is that this change is not being well communicated. There is a possibility that the South African government do implement it on the 1st of March with very little notice, and then people will be rushing to try and withdraw funds from pension funds, and they'll miss this deadline. So that's where, again, I come back to be prepared, like a Boy Scout. Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Tanya. I think that's it. I don't think there's any more questions come through. If there is, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'll just share my screen again now so you can see our contact details. Don't know why this is not playing ball. Previous, there we go. Oh, no, now I've completely ruined it. Okay. hopefully you've got all of our details from the previous slides. I hope it's been worthwhile. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and if you've got any questions, and I look forward to speaking to you in due course. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.